Over the last 3 months, the GOAT format meta had some pretty interesting developments. It's not just the same old, same old. We've got some old decks that have some pretty new innovative choices, and then we've got some new decks entirely that I think are worth discussing. So guys, if you want to stay on top of the GOAT format meta, be sure to watch this whole video. Welcome to GOAT Duels, I'm ACP, now let's get started. For the first deck of this video, I want to talk about this spicy Chaos Turbo deck from Ghost Rider 15. Now, there's a lot of interesting things about this deck. Not only the cards that it's playing, but also the cards that it's not playing. We definitely need to talk about both. So, interesting choices as far as what it's not playing. Note that there are 0 Dakochis in here, in this list. I am not sure if I agree with that, to be honest. But I definitely don't think you have to play 2 or 3 Dakochis in this kind of Chaos deck. Trap lineup, also very interesting. I actually want to talk about this trap lineup a bit because, you know, one of the things that I've said in some of my previous videos that people have expressed doubt about is that versus a lot of Chaos Turbo decks, you actually want to side out Heavy Storm, and possibly also Breaker. And versus like this list specifically, Heavy Storm is basically just not a real card, right? In the sense that, okay, I mean, you could maybe like Heavy Storm a set Bookamoon, or you can like Heavy Storm a set Ring if they have nothing to use those cards on. But everything else is like pretty chainable. I mean, Wing Blast, like normally there'll be a monster that they can Wing Blast in response to your Heavy Storm. So yeah, that's just something that I wanted to mention. Like, playing Heavy Storm against this deck is a lot like playing Nobleman of Crossout against a Warrior deck, right? Like, it's not necessarily something that is 100% dead, but it is going to be like a very bad card a lot of the time. And I think that's interesting. Another interesting thing about this deck is the fact that we are playing 3 Time Seals and 0 Trap Dust Shoots. No, we don't even have Dust Shoots in the side. And I think this is kind of an interesting point of contention among the Chaos Turbo players. You know, you have some people, I'll get people in my comments that just act like, oh, if you're not playing 3 Trap Dust Shoots in every single GOAT format deck, you're an idiot. And then you have other players, you know, not only Ghost Rider 15, but also, to an extent, Anthony Alvarado, that kind of take the opposite approach, which is, yeah, Dust Shoot's a good card, but it's also kind of situational, and I would rather play something else, right? I don't think anyone, including this player, Ghost Rider 15, I don't think he would say Dust Shoot is a bad card. But it's a question of, is it the best card that you could be playing? And I think that is still a question that is kind of up in the air, right? We don't really know the answer yet. But, you know, by not playing Dust Shoots, you have fewer dead cards against a Warrior deck, which is a very common matchup and also tends to be a very difficult matchup. And I think that's nice. Also, something that I think is nice, Phoenix Windblast. Obviously, you guys knew I was going to talk about that. One of my favorite cards in GOAT format. And yeah, this is I love this deck and how it's using Phoenix Windblast. And in fact, next time I stream, I'm probably going to stream this deck because this is my kind of deck. I like a lot of the choices here. Wing Blast, I think if you want to play it, I think you have to play 3, and I think you have to play it with the double Night Assailant. Whereas Raigeki Break, I think, is the sort of like more generically applicable card, right? You can play Raigeki Break as like a 1 of or a 2 of. You can play it with Night Assailant. You can play it without Night Assailant. Wing Blast, I think, is, in my opinion, I think it's kind of the more powerful card, but at the same time, like, it is a bit more of a build-around card. So, you know, not only do we have the synergies that I just talked about, we also have, like, Mask of Darkness. And going, like, you know, Wing Blast, Mask of Darkness, get back your Wing Blast, that can be strong. Mask of Darkness, obviously great with, like, Time Seal as well. Mask of Darkness, very strong with Ring. I've talked about that for a long time. You know, if your opponent, like, Solemns, you can go, like, Ring, Mask, Ring, kill your opponent. That's pretty cool. Obviously, you know, people are going to point out, oh, you can go Mask, Tsukiyomi, Time Seal, and lock out your opponent. Like, yes, you can, but statistically speaking, like, that's almost never going to happen. Like, it can happen, but it's not like this is some sort of, like, dedicated lockdown deck. This is basically just another way of building chaos. You know, we got like the 3 Jargreens and the 2 upstarts. That's become a lot more common lately. The Mirror and the Tarantula are in the side. And I would normally, you know, advocate putting these in the main, but I think here with this deck, like, I think you have a reasonable excuse. It's like, what are you going to cut for these? I think you could cut like 1 Time Seal for a Mirror Force, I think that's totally fine, if you want to do that. But yeah, I like this. I think even though you don't have Mirror and Torrential, which would help you a lot in the Warrior matchups, I think you kind of make up for that by having, a lot of other things that are good in the Warrior matchups. Like we're playing Time Steal instead of Trap Dust Shoot. And that's a very big statement, by the way. This player, Ghost Rider, he is saying, I think Time Steal is a better card than Trap Dust Shoot. And that's pretty wild. And, we're going to talk about that more with the next deck in this video. Wing Blast, I think is generally better versus Warriors than Raigeki Break is. Using Wing Blast on like a Mystic Swordsman level 2 could be very powerful in particular. Even if you just like Wing Blast, whatever it is, a Blade Knight or something, it's like, okay, they can't get it back with Premature Burial, Call to Hana, they can't banish for BLS. Everything else is pretty standard. Also got 3 Magician of Faiths, which with 10 spells, I think is a little ambitious. Especially given that like some of these spells, like yes, you can go Magician of Faith to get back Upstart Goblin, but that is like really not what you're trying to do. So if you wanted to cut like a Magician of Faith for a Dekochi, I think that would be totally reasonable if I'm being honest. But like I like the Mask of Darkness. We talked about that in our 69 underrated GOAT format cards video. I like the Wing Blast and the Time Steals. There's kind of some synergy there. Like Wing Blast, yes, it has synergy with Trap Dust Shoot, but it also has synergy with Time Seal, where you can Wing Blast something and then activate Time Seal so they don't draw it next turn. They're going to draw it, 2 turns after, which is pretty cool. Side, pretty standard. Nothing that we haven't seen before. I like the Dust Tornadoes in this side, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, you could argue that this deck is going to be a little weak versus Burn. We have no MST in the main. That's like another one where, I don't know. I would like to see MST in the main, if I'm being totally honest. Like, it would be another Magician of Faith target. It would help out Royal Decree. It would be good versus Burn. But, depending on your metagame, maybe you don't need it. But yeah, we got like MST, Dust Tornadoes. I don't know if that's enough for Burn, if I'm being honest. Also 3 Mind Controls on the side. That's kind of spicy too. But let's move on to the next deck. So just to be clear, the last deck, the Chaos Turbo deck from Ghost Rider, that got first place in a 200-ish person tournament. This deck here, this Warrior deck, got second place in a different 100-person tournament. This for the most part looks like a standard Warrior deck, right? I mean, I like to feature Warriors in most of these metagame updates because it's the second most popular deck, so it makes sense that we talk about it. What's different, though, is we got Time Seal again. Sometimes I just like to drive home the point by just emphasizing, like, hey, Time Seal, good card. Lots of people are catching on to this. We see 2 Time Seals, 2 Jar of Greeds. Jar of Greed is very popular in Warriors these days. Time Seal, I think, is also totally viable. Instead of sort of comboing like Time Seal with Wing Blast, we're doing like Time Seal and Dust Shoot, which I think is fine. Dust Shoot, I think, is a little overrated, but like in Warriors, you still got to play Dust Shoot. Time Seal, also great in Warriors. It's funny, I actually played like Time Seal myself in Warriors in like 2006. It wasn't very good, but it's interesting to see that again. The monster line at this point, very standard. We see these 13 monsters in pretty much every Warrior deck these days. But, 13 is not really a lot of monsters, so you kind of make up for that by having the Jar of Greeds to draw more cards and get to those monsters faster. So we're not really playing like 13 monsters in a 40 card deck. We're kind of playing 13 monsters in a 38 card deck, which is a little more reasonable. Some Warrior decks, they even play 3 Jar of Greeds. I think that's totally reasonable as well. Spells, I think this is pretty much like the 11 spells that every Warrior deck plays at this point. Warrior decks, to be honest, I think have become like a lot more optimized, even just in like the last 3 months. I know some people, you always have the pessimists that say, oh, like you just feature the same decks in every video, GOAT format never changes. But yeah, I think like the Chaos Turbo decks is where there's kind of a lot of debate as far as like what's optimal, whereas I think like the Warrior decks have become like a lot more optimized. Like other than these 2 Time Seals, these 38 cards are pretty much what every single Warrior deck is playing, if I'm being totally honest. Like they're all playing 2 Dust Shoots, they're all playing 2 to 3 Jar of Greeds. If you cut the Time Seals, it would probably be for Dust Tornado. I mean, 2 Dust Tornado is kind of the standard number. Is there a big difference between 1 versus 2 Dust Tornadoes? Not really. We've got like the Zing Zenhu in the side. That's something that can also potentially be mains. Mirror Torrential, Standard and Warrior decks. Chaos decks are still figuring out if they want those cards or not. Sakuretsu Armors to protect like our Blade Knights and Kaikus from bigger monsters, either, in the main or the side. Side here is also, standardish, not a lot to talk about. We've got Zombira as a, searchable card for the mirror to attack over the Blade Knights. Morphing Jar, this is actually a card I like in the Warrior side a lot. People side out their crossouts, and then you can kind of set your whole hand. They might think, oh, maybe they've just got like a bunch of Jar Greeds and Time Seals, but it's like, no, I set my whole hand because I have Morphing Jar. That's pretty cool. I mean, smart players will kind of know that this will be Morphing Jar, but sometimes they won't be able to do anything about it, right? Like if you're up against a Chaos deck and their hand is like all monsters, they won't be able to do anything about it. Smashing Ground also for the mirror, some more Speller Trap removal, Cypher Soldiers, really a lot of stuff for the mirror, if I'm being honest. Amazoness Archer, searchable way to deal with Ojama tokens. So yeah, not much more I'll say here. This is kind of like the same Warrior deck that we've always seen. I still think Warriors are one of the best decks in GOAT format. I think, if as a Chaos player you want to win, I think you need to be respecting decks like this. Our third deck is this very unique list here by Nova Ethos. I don't know what to call this. I mean, I'm sure some people would be tempted to say, well, it's Warriors because it has 2 reinforcement of the army in it. I personally would call this something like Reaper Control, and I'll get into why. But this deck got first place in an IRL GOAT format tournament, and it was a very stacked IRL GOAT format tournament. Had players like Anthony Alvarado, AJT, BLS, and plenty of other recognizable names in the top 8. So this player definitely did not have an easy path to first place. But what I like about this, it's got like a lot of cool synergies. Some that we've seen before, but some that are, I would say, pretty new. So yeah, I think the key card here is these 3 Spirit Reapers. And what are we doing with these? Well, I mean, Spirit Reaper is just, I would say, just generically a pretty good card in GOAT format. But what we have here is we're really going after Chaos with cards like Mind Control. Obviously, 2 Noblemen to cross out, you always play that, but it's having a very important role in this deck where, your opponent's going to set a monster and then you get rid of it with the cross out or the Mind Control, summon Spirit Reaper, attack directly, get a card out of their hand, or you just force them to use up a power card like a Raigeki Break or a Mirror Force very early on in the game. So I like this deck a lot. We only have 5 Warriors here. I don't think you have to play these 5 Warriors. It's definitely very unusual that, we have Exiled Force in the side, but I can see it. I mean, this deck definitely values its normal summon a lot. I can certainly see something like Mind Control being better than Exiled Force due to the aforementioned synergy with the Spirit Reaper. Mataza the Zapper is another one where I think you can main it. If you don't main it, I could see it being just a good side deck because this card's very good against GOAT control. You can kill 2 GOAT tokens and it can't be taken by Thousand Eyes Restrict, which is pretty nice. Obviously, like the synergy here is Robin Goblin. I don't think you're going to get that off very often, if I'm going to be honest. I mean, you'll definitely do it sometimes, but don't think that, we're talking about 2 1-ofs that kind of require your opponent to have nothing on the field. Obviously, Robin Goblin is a very spicy tech card. Note something that's pretty noteworthy about Robin Goblin is it does work with defensive monsters too, like Gravekeeper Spy, right? So if you have a Robin Goblin and a Gravekeeper Spy set, and your opponent attacks into the Spy with something that has less than 2,000 attack, you just flip Robin Goblin, they take damage, and then they have to discard a card in their hand. So that's pretty cool. I definitely like the synergy there. Gravekeeper Spy, I mean, we all know, probably like the best monster in GOAT format, but Spy is doing a lot of work here. It's a tribute for Zaborg, it's got the synergy with Robin Goblin, and you kind of need to play Spy so that if you mind control your opponent's Spy, you have something to search with it. Otherwise, not too much to talk about with the monsters, mostly just staples. We only have 4 light monsters for BLS, but the Blade Knight is searchable with reinforcement of the army, which is nice. The one on Smashing Ground, I'm not sure if that's really something that you need to main deck, but against the aggressive decks, it can clear the way for the Spirit Reaper. And yeah, I mean, Spirit Reaper is pretty much good against everything. You can kind of wall up against Warriors a lot with this deck, just with Spy, Reaper, and you have Zombira the Dark. So I think this deck is going to do pretty well against both Warriors and your average Chaos deck. So I like this a lot. I definitely want to play something like this on stream sometimes. Some things in here I'd say you could argue are a little like unoptimized. Like we've got like one of Dust Shoot, one of Zing Zenhu. Is that really what we want? I don't know. I don't know. I think I would like Dust Tornado better than the Zing Zenhu, although it's close. Like you can go like end phase Dust Tornado and use Dust second effect to set Robin Goblin. Something that could come up on occasion. And one of Dust Shoot, I don't know. To me, it's a little weird. Who knows? Maybe this Dust Shoot should be a time seal, right? And then the side, kind of a mishmash of different one-ofs could probably be improved. This is one of those decks that I think people are going to sleep on, but, I think it's a lot better than people think. Yeah, it's probably not optimal, but if you take it and kind of tinker a bit with the choices, I think, you could really be onto something with a deck like this here. Our last deck of the day is Chaos Control. Chaos Control's picked up in popularity a bit, probably, I don't know, third or fourth most popular deck in GOAT format. Lots of people like this deck. I decided to use this list by ConfuseRay. It got second place in an online GOAT format tournament. Chaos Control hasn't really been getting the big W's that the other decks on this list have, but it's still a good deck nonetheless. And for me, the selling point behind Chaos Control has always been that you pretty much get to play a normal Chaos deck, right? We see all the same cards, Dokochi, Spy, Magician of Faith, Thunder Dragon, etc. Monster lineup, basically the same as a normal Chaos deck, but we get to play like GOAT's meta and, potentially some other stuff to kind of hedge us for those decks that are kind of trying to counter Chaos. So things like Kaiku, this deck deals with better than the average Chaos deck. Things like even Return from the Different Dimension, right? They try to return for game and you go, oh no, I have Scapegoat to stop that, which is nice. Any sort of aggression on behalf of your opponent, we can deal with pretty well. So yeah, that's what I like about Chaos Control. And people have been building it different ways. I'm not sure if I like this trap lineup. Like, do we really want like 2 Solemn Judgments? I don't know. I mean, some of this stuff is probably preference. Here we've got like 3 Jargreeds, no upstarts. Is that correct? I don't know. Personally, I think Chaos Control should be experimenting with Decree a lot more just because, you look at some of the other decks on this list today, Decree would be pretty good against them, right? A lot of people are being really greedy on their trap counts. Warrior decks are playing like 15 traps. The average Chaos deck's playing like 10 traps. I don't know. I would like to see Decree. Another option for something you can play in the main deck here is Creature Swap. I don't even see Creature Swap in this side. Now, Creature Swap, there are some risks that come with it in that, like, hey, if you try to swap something, your opponent can chain, like, Raigeki Break or Ring of Destruction on your monster. But, yeah, I think there's some potential there with Creature Swap as well. Otherwise, this is mostly just a standard Chaos deck. Not going to talk about it too much. Even the side, pretty standard stuff here. We got, like, Zumbara in the side. We've got Azura in the side. Some of these Chaos Control decks, sometimes I'll see them mainly Azura. And I think that can be a little better if you do decide to main the Creature Swap, because then you can swap the Azura. Otherwise, yeah, pretty standard main, pretty standard side. I think the Speller Trap lineup could be changed a bit. Monster lineup, it's typically going to look something like this. So in the long run, I expect Chaos Control to be in the meta to stay. It's just a question of, again, people figuring out some of these, final choices. Finally, to address the elephant in the room, I wanted to briefly mention that, these numbers you see on these cards, like 10 on the Metamorphosis, 30, 40, 100, whatever. For those who don't know, that's because of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis format that Konami just announced. In Dueling Book, I swear, I was trying to figure out some sort of way to get rid of those numbers. It's like, I can't figure out how to get rid of them. So if someone knows how to get rid of these numbers, let me know. I just find it extremely annoying when I'm showcasing these decks. If there is no way to get rid of these numbers, I probably will just build like a browser extension that will get rid of them. So yeah, let me know if that's something you want me to do. And if you want me to actually just make a video on my thoughts on Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis, I can do that too. Because I do have some thoughts on that format. It is kind of a retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Format that may or may not compete with GOAT format. So yeah, let me know if you guys want me to adjust that in another video. Thanks for watching.